So I want to welcome everyone. We're going to be speaking about the shamanic journey. And I have been going back and forth for the last 6 months since I knew I was coming to try to understand if I could actually teach you how to journey in 40 minutes. And I have come to the conclusion that I think you would have a more valuable experience if I talk to you a little bit about the journey, the context in which the journey takes place, and the contexts both in traditional settings and in the modern setting for the journey. In terms of specifically healing, we're going to be focusing on healing techniques that the journey is a fundamental part of. And so I'll be speaking to you about shamanic understandings of imbalance that are common to almost all shamanic cultures. And we're going to be talking about the similarity between these practices that arise around the world, and the journey is definitely one of those practices that you find in almost all shamanic contexts. And you also find these same definitions of healing and imbalance, or imbalance and the antidote to them, in different cultures. And so I'll be speaking about those understandings of imbalance, which are power loss and soul loss. And if we have time, I'll be talking about energetic interference and soul part exchange. So I do want to leave some time for questions. And I really think questions are a very important part of the teaching. So if you have a question about the work at the end, I'll be taking questions then. So before I kind of set into my lecture, I want to thank everyone at SAND who has done so much to make this happen. Thank you. And I think it's really important to have this moment to all come together. I had this, you got to get used to me, I cry a lot, sorry. I had this vision this morning about how beautiful it is that all of you are here and that you are all going back to your communities. And it's like, it's like we're bees coming together, you know, to be together in this hive of positive intentionality and learning and drawing. And, you know, that it's so important to have this moment and to have many of these moments where consciousness is furthered. And I know all of you are going to go back to your own communities, and you will be furthering consciousness within them. And one of the intentions when I'm setting circles, I have set thousands of circles at this point, is that the circle remain in non-ordinary reality to become sort of engine or dynamo that you can draw upon as you go back to your communities. And you know, I think this whole conference is going to be that for you, you know, to draw upon. And it's important that we have these places where we take a moment to establish a stronger connection to power, the universal power. And there are so many pathways to personal power. And, you know, there's meditation, there's the journey, there's, you know, investigation on a scientific level. There are understandings that are provided by the different religious orthodoxies. There's so many paths, but we have to take the time to deepen our understanding of the path that is right for us. And so I'm going to be talking about the shamanic journey, which is one of those pathways. And I apologize that we are not going to be actually doing a journey today, but I am actually teaching a class on the phone on the journey where I teach people how to maintain a journey practice on your own, because the journey is an absolutely invaluable, especially the way that I try to work with it, an invaluable way not that my way is the best way or anything, but I work with it in a slightly different way than traditional shamanic practitioners might, in terms of helping people use the journey as a method of self-evolution, as a stepping stone toward working with any kind of obstacles that you might have to your own personal power, and being able to deepen and widen your ability to be more empowered in the world. And this was something that shamans, of course, have always been engaged in, which is understanding power, and certainly the power of nature, but not necessarily for the evolution of consciousness. It's usually shamans are working with this power in order to bring the power into the affairs of humans, in order to, again, heal, do divinations, problem solve, do mediations, guide the spirits of the dead, anything that has to do with ministering or education. And so I will be teaching that class on, it's already started, but there's a recording that you can listen to, and it's from 5 to 7 on Tuesdays Pacific time for the next 3 weeks. And you've got the one that happened this Tuesday that you can step into if you want to learn more about the experiential aspect of the journey. So I'd like to talk a little bit about shamanism in general, and then kind of revisit the role of the shaman that I've just pointed to in a traditional setting, and then talk about applied shamanism, which is the form of shamanic practice that I have developed over, well, I've been in active practice for about 20 years with shamanic counseling and with a spiritual counseling model that I developed called depth hypnosis, which combines shamanic understandings about the nature of imbalance and provides the remedies in a shamanic way, or the power of the shamanic practice is there, but we adapt it into a hypnotherapeutic process, so people don't have to step into drums and feathers if they're not comfortable. so but you still have the power of it. So let's talk about shamanism in general. So shamanic practice is something, again, that you find in almost all cultures that have ever been on the planet. This is one of the few cultures where you don't find shamanic practice as the center of the spiritual and educational and problem-solving support for the culture. And it's important to understand that it is still relevant today. These practices, although they're very ancient in nature, they have a tremendous amount of relevance today, but for different reasons than why they were or are relevant in the in different indigenous contexts. The word shaman is a Mongolian word that means he or she who knows. And so what does he or she know? He or she knows that there is an unseen power in the natural world, and he or she knows how that power interfaces and can be actually even directed into the world of the seen of humans. So shamans have been doing this for millennia, and as I said, the striking thing about finding shamanic practice in different cultures is the similarity of the practice. You might have different cultural trappings that make it look different, and you have definitely schools of shamanic practice that are not necessarily focused on light or positive activity. But those that are focused in that way do have very similar practices. And as I said, the journey is one of those practices. And I'd like to talk about the journey in the context of the education of someone who is called to the path of shamanic practice. So the journey itself is a process of altering the state of consciousness so that you can begin to perceive, so that the shamanic practitioner can begin to perceive aspects of experience that are not normally available through the conscious mind way of working. And I know at the conference there's a lot about non-dual thinking, and you know, it's interesting because in shamanic practice, you don't even think about dual or non-dual. You're just in with nature, you know, and you kind of become part of it. And the journey is the process of bringing you into this luminous world of the power that lies in behind the forms of nature. And one of the things that you'll see in almost every culture where shamanism has existed is that it's understood that the natural world is here, but there is an unseen aspect to it, which is often referred to as a helping spirit. And that word spirit is a little bit complicated for Westerners, so, you know, please translate it into anything that makes it work for you, like the force, helping force, I don't know. But these are, from my experience working in this way, I understand these teachers that emerge in non-ordinary reality through the process of the journey as generally, especially when you're working with the intention to contact compassionate beings. These are compassionate beings that are taking the form of nature that might, in another spiritual practice, for instance, take the form of Tara or Mary or some other iconography. But in shamanism, the iconography is the iconography of nature. So the journey is taken with the help of the drum or the rattle or the chanting, some kind of repetitive sound that alters the state of consciousness. And that repetitive sound is called a sonic driver. So the drumming begins, actually, Kamala, do you mind getting my drum? The drumming begins, and the rhythm of the drum, thank you, is where the focus of attention of the journeyer is. Now, the interesting thing about the drum is one of the most commonly used drivers for the journey. And the interesting thing is the traditional drumming beat that you find again in many, many cultures apparently has been measured to be, I think, at 9 megahertz, which is the same measurement that physicists find for the rhythm of the earth. So it's really interesting to think that this is what shamanic practitioners have been doing, is creating a sound wave that is in alignment with the wave of the sound, the wave of experience of the earth. So I'm going to just do a little bit of the beat so that you understand how it might work. So as that rhythm is happening, the journeyer goes to a place that is known to them in ordinary reality, and they depart from that place into the cosmography of the inner cosmography of the journey, which is described as the upper world, the middle world, and the lower world. And again, you'll see there's a little bit of a parallel there with the external experience of the sky, the place where we are here on the surface of the earth, and the world beneath the earth. So the journeyer will go to a place that is prescribed. And again, the interesting thing is, in almost every culture, you see the same departure points for going to the lower world and the same departure points for going to the upper world. The lower world is generally accessed through a body of water or a hole in the ground or a cavern or a hole in the tree, and the upper world is generally accessed through a high place, the top of a mountain, the top of a hill, or the top of a roof. So the journeyer goes to that place, focuses their attention on the rhythm of the drum or the other sonic driver. I've had Siberian shamans that have been in circles that I've been in have described that they ride the drum the way that they ride their horse. So they're riding their horse in ordinary reality, and they ride their drum into non-ordinary reality. I love that. It's very graphic. And so this is the process that people use to establish relationships with the unseen powers of nature, and they take the form of animals, plants, people, maybe sound, a sound or light, or a star, or some other aspect of nature. And it is important to, of course, establish with the journey that the particular being that emerges through the intention to connect with a helping spirit is in fact a teacher. And this is one of the things that I try to really help people with when I'm teaching, is to help them develop a disciplined practice, because one of the things that happens in sort of the New Age circles where you find shamanic practice, or where you find, or even like Pentecostal kind of situations or other kinds of shamanic situations where there's not a lot of discipline, you can get a lot of energetic interference coming in. So important to have aspect of discipline. So you would, in the first journey, you would establish a relationship with a being that you have set the intention to meet. You establish that it's the teacher, and then from there you ask questions of that teacher. And generally speaking, the questions that we begin with in applied shamanism are questions about healing. And this is because many of us are dealing with a lot of issues that we can't get inner guidance from in any kind of clear way, because for lots of different reasons. And I like working with the journey. I also teach meditation, and I've worked with Buddhism for 45 years, and I think meditation is wonderful. But I really like this adaptation into the journey of actually a Vipassana approach, where you are asking about different aspects of your experience, but you are doing it with the help of a guide or a teacher. And the reason that I like adapting this in the modern way, in this way, is because most modern people are dealing with things that people in an indigenous environment are not dealing with, which is psychological isolation and a disconnection from nature. So just the possibility of having this kind of inquiry supported by a helping spirit that is non-dogmatic in nature. This is not a spiritual practice that you have to subscribe to in order to be able to use. You just have to try it out, that maybe nature holds some power that you haven't discovered. That's all. And then you can begin to ask questions. And I have a journey here that one of my students in the Shamanic Journey class did. This is her second journey that I'd like to offer you. Where are we on time? Okay, thank you. So she says, I only recently learned to journey, and I met my lower world guide, a little spider monkey who can fly as well as climb really well. When I arrived in the lower world, he was very high up in a tree. I asked him what I needed to understand about the nature of my fear and anxiety. He told me to climb up into the tree. I climbed up, and he did a dance and told me to do the same. Then he pointed from the tree at something I couldn't quite make out. He told me to jump. I told him I was afraid, and he said, let go of your fear, jump. And then he jumped. I followed and landed in water. We swam to an underground water cave, and he was inside with some kind of light. He said to follow him. I got out of the water and followed him. The earth beneath me became muddy and thick, and it was difficult to walk. He moved further and further away from me. The light grew dimmer and dimmer until he disappeared, and I was stuck in this deep, thick mud. I felt afraid and began to panic. Then I noticed there were trees with low-hanging branches on either side of me. I grabbed onto one of the low-hanging branches and began to pull myself up out of the mud. I continued to climb up the tree until I reached the top and found my guide sitting there waiting for me, smiling. It is the same tree that we jumped from at the beginning of the journey. And this is her processing. She says, words do not describe how powerful this journey was for me. It was like the guide had taken me through my experience of fear and anxiety and shown me the other side of it. I still have a lot to learn about this, but what I understand about my fear as a result of this journey is that I do not trust myself. I hesitate and become stuck as a result of my fear, and anxiety follows. When I became stuck in the mud and the guide left me, I was alone, abandoned and frightened. I was left to fend for myself. I had to trust myself. And when I freed myself from the mud, I was reunited with my guide, who had the general air of saying, see, that wasn't so hard. So this is the second journey that someone took, and they had been dealing with anxiety in therapy for quite a while, and they really felt that this was a very powerful, visceral teaching for them. And again, you can see how it would be difficult to, if you're sitting with anxiety and meditation by yourself, it might have, I know I've spent a lot of time sitting in meditation by myself and anxiety, and it's really nice to have a guide. I got to tell you. You can see how that psychological isolation provides power, and from shamanic terms, that remedy to psychological isolation of the presence of the guide is allows someone to go much further into their issues than they might ordinarily do. And this process of going into one's issues with the journey is a very modern idea. Again, in the traditional context, the shaman uses the journey to establish a relationship with the spirit of nature. They may have some kind of healing that they need to do, because one of the calls to the path of shamanic practice is a strong vision or a strong dream that might have overwhelmed the person's psyche, or they may have a illness or a calamity that they have to understand. And in the process of healing that illness or that calamity or understanding that vision, they then learn what it is to be able to heal other people or help other people in the way that they are being trained. So then once you've got this relationship with the teacher, you have learned the nature of the teacher through your own work, you can then begin to work with others. And that's when a shaman might be asked to help someone with the symptoms, for instance, of power loss. And the symptoms of power loss are generally mild anxiety, sleeplessness, mild attention problems, a kind of, mild depression, kind of loss of joie de vivre, just kind of like, this is hard. And on a physical level, you can have mild autoimmune problems, for instance, or, a kind of, actually, a chronic disease will actually create power loss. Or you can have a parent who is very critical, or that criticism would create power loss over time. And you could have your own internal critic, which would create power loss. So when someone comes to a shaman for help with these kinds of symptoms, the shaman would work with the helping spirits that the shaman has established a relationship with to find the source of power that will remedy that power loss. And again, when you're working shamanically, you're always working at the level of spirit. So you may have the manifestation of imbalance on the physical level with the autoimmune problem, on the mental level with the anxiety, the emotional level with the depression, or even on the spirit level in a kind of spiritual emergency. But the shaman always works on the spirit level, and that will correct whatever is manifesting on the other levels. So the shamanic practitioner would then go into the journey, connect with the teacher with whom the shaman has already established a relationship with, and ask, what is the source of power that is going to remedy these symptoms for this person? And then the helping spirit would find that source of power. Usually the source of power, again, takes the form of nature. It might be a star, it might be a bowl of water, it might be a fire, who knows what it might be. And the shamanic practitioner gathers the power and brings it back to the person and blows the power into their energy system, usually into the back of the heart. And this, in a traditional setting, is the end of the healing of power loss. And the person will generally feel better, especially because in a traditional setting, everyone knows the power of the shaman, and there is something about, feeling this support of the power of the shaman, his or herself. But the person is not asked to establish a relationship with that power on their own. And this is where the big difference comes in applied shamanism, because we do all of that, but then we do a short hypnotherapeutic process to help the person connect with that source of power on their own and ask certain questions, such as, what were the circumstances under which you left? What can I do to make you more comfortable, or how do I integrate this power into my life? So then the person establishes the relationship with the power on their own. And this empowerment is very important for modern times, because we are all working, all of you know how hard it is to maintain the ability to stay conscious with so much unconsciousness around you, and how difficult it is to try to help those that you're trying to help. And having this kind of a tool to empower not only yourself, but to offer it to other people that you're working with, and to have the concept of being able to retrieve power, to be able to repattern imbalance in this way is very important. And it's a very wonderful antidote to hopelessness that many of us are experiencing as we're trying to do our best in the world. And for this reason, I think the shamanic practices in general, especially when we do them with the applied shamanism piece for the modern world, are really wonderful tools. And I'm so happy to have this opportunity to talk to you and to offer you this little tiny taste of shamanic practice. And I hope you can see the potentials for yourself. And if you want to learn more, come join the class. It's on the phone, or come to the sacredstream.org website. There's lots more information, and look forward to being in circle with you again soon.